Hello and welcome to today's Roundtable, Community Schools, a Vehicle for Reimagining Education in New York. I'm Allie Leidy, the Associate Executive Director at the New York State Network for Youth Success, and we are the backbone organization for the New York State Community Schools Network. Go to the next slide. On behalf of our steering committee members listed here, I would like to thank you all for joining us today over Zoom or via our YouTube live stream. We hope you all will be actively engaged in today's conversation on social media. We're using hashtag NYS Community Schools, and you'll see it on these slides as well. And also using the chat box, which is available on both platforms. We have moderators ready to help answer questions and take note of any questions that you have for our speakers today. Please take a moment now to test out the chat by telling us who you are, what school, organization, or office you're with, and where you're joining from today. We're excited to hear you. And we can go to the next slide. While you're doing that, I'd like to share a little bit about the New York State Community Schools Network. We advocate to develop, promote, and sustain community schools in collaboration with government, local school districts, and community partners. Through a diverse coalition of community-based agencies, parents, teachers, and statewide advocates, we champion effective community school policies so that children and families can thrive. We first convened in 2014, and if you'd like to learn more, we hope that you'll sign up for our listserv to receive our updates. We're going to put a link into the chat box now on both platforms to a document with all of the resources and videos that we'll be sharing during today's roundtable. That includes the sign up link for our listserv. So we hope that you will sign up. We can go to the next slide. We have a really exciting agenda for today. I'm so excited. I'm seeing the chats come in. We have folks coming from all across the state. In just a few short minutes, I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker. That will be followed by a panel discussion with a student and practitioners who are going to be sharing their firsthand experience with community schools. And finally, we'll hear the legislative perspective on community schools as well. Throughout, we're going to take a look at some of the community schools in our state. We have some great videos, and we're going to test your knowledge a little bit on community schools. We want this to be interactive and fun, and I'm a big fan of trivia. So we can go to the next slide. What is a community school? Community schools are a collaborative strategy that organize community resources to best support the success of students. As a place, community schools function as a hub, providing services tailored to the needs of students and families. Community schools address the needs of students in a holistic way. This is not just their academic achievement, but also their overall health and well-being, to create conditions for learning, growth, and success. Community schools work to address the potential needs of students and remove barriers to learning. In July, we at the Community Schools Network released a policy brief which talks a little bit more about what a community school is and shares what these community schools in New York have been doing since the onset of the pandemic to support their students and families. We'll put the link in the chat, but it's in the set of resources shared earlier as well, so you can access that full policy brief. Now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into what a community school is. We have a short 2.5-minute video from the Partnership for the Future of Learning, which will help us gain a little bit better understanding that we're going to share now.
What makes a school a great school? Caring for the whole child, expanding the horizons of learning, building relationships with families, working together to realize a shared vision. This is the school every student needs. This is a community school. Community schools are public schools that partner with stakeholders to create the conditions students need to thrive. Community schools can be found across the United States, and their numbers are growing fast. But what exactly makes a school a community school? They integrate student supports, Clinics, counselors, and other services ensure each and every student is ready to learn. They expand and enrich learning. Extended school days, summer programs, and real-world experiences help students reach their full potential. They engage families and communities. Partnering with residents to identify and meet community needs makes everyone feel safe, welcome, and involved in school. They lead in collaboration. Inclusive decision-making and peer learning builds trust among students, educators, families, and communities. When a school stands on these 4 pillars, it's a community school. Research supports this 4-pillar approach, but there's no one-size-fits-all model. Every community school is different because each community is different. Figuring out what it looks like in your community starts by getting actual community members involved. That's the full-time job of community school coordinators. They're the human bridge connecting all the partners and stakeholders that make community schools possible. So that's what makes a school a community school. Now, how do you pay for it? Startup costs like hiring a full-time coordinator can be raised from foundations or state and local governments. Tapping into existing funding and partnering with local businesses can bring in service providers. Sharing resources and staff with partners can help everyone do more. And as a community school becomes more established, leaders can advocate for budgets that sustain their impact and new funding to expand it. Every community school is different. What will yours be like? Get started at communityschools.futureforlearning.org.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that video. I really appreciate the way that they break down the community school strategy and also explain the importance of the community school coordinator in doing the work of community schools. Now, I'm about to introduce our wonderful keynote speaker, but first let's play one round of trivia. Let's do screen share on the slides here. Get that up in just a second. All right, so our question here, and you can enter your response in the chat box. Which of these type of schools can be a community school? A, public schools, so you can put an A if you think that's the answer. B, charter schools. C, private schools. D, parochial schools. E, all schools. All right, I see some answers coming in. All right, yes. The answer here is E. All schools can be a community school. The community school strategy works to address the needs of students in a holistic way, and that can benefit students in any kind of school. Great answers. All right. That was an awesome first round of trivia. We're going to play a couple more later on in today's event. So we can go to the next slide. It is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today. Abe Fernandez directs the National Center for Community Schools and oversees the place-based collective impact initiatives at Children's Aid, leveraging over 20 years of experience in education, youth development, and the social impact sector. He's a national expert on the community school strategy, and with the team at the National Center, provides consultation and training to initiatives around New York State, the country, and beyond. Thank you, Abe, for being with us this afternoon. I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Allie, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for bringing us together today, Allie. It is wonderful to have us gathered here and to see so many familiar names and faces, some folks I haven't seen in some time. So it's nice to kind of have a reunion of sorts. It's also really inspiring to see how far and wide the community school strategy has grown across the great state of New York. So let me just first start by saying how grateful I am to have this opportunity to share some of my thoughts about community schools. But like you, I'm sure, I'm excited to hear the panel conversations that are lined up on the schedule for today. So I'll do my best to be brief. Several years ago, I attended a talk by Dr. Tony Smith, who was at the time the superintendent of Oakland Unified School District. In identifying the challenges of public education and the barriers to success that young people face, he boiled it all down to one simple yet profound statement. He said, "Our problem is that we are talent abundant, but opportunity scarce." Talent abundant, but opportunity scarce. The problem, as I understood him, was not the kids. The kids are full of promise and possibility. It's actually the choices we, the adults, make, the systems we have built and tolerated and perpetuated that limit opportunities for our children to succeed. Talent abundant, but opportunity scarce. To this day, Tony's words continue to resonate for me. On reflection, it crystallizes what I've dedicated my career to address. As Ali mentioned, I'm the Vice President for Collective Impact at Children's Aid in New York City, which has partnered with the New York City Department of Education on community schools for nearly 30 years, since the early 1990s. In my capacity as the Director of the National Center for Community Schools, I have the great privilege to lead a team responsible for helping folks start up, sustain, and scale community schools in New York City, New York State, and throughout the country through a combination of training, consultation, and other forms of capacity building. Our vision is every school a community school. We definitely would have answered E on that question. And we are proud to have worked with nearly every major community school initiative across the country. Now, as many of you know, and as the video we just saw does a great job explaining, community schools are school community partnerships that create conditions students need to thrive. They're usually open into the evening, on weekends, and year-round, and they feature a wide range of programs and services, including after school and summer, early childhood, healthcare, college and career preparation, parent engagement, and even supports for adults who might not have children or school-age children. But it's important to emphasize that community schools are much more than merely a more efficient service delivery mechanism. When at their best, they become the engines of opportunity and problem solving that all children deserve. Strong community schools authentically lift up and listen to the voices of students, families, and community members, voices that have too often been ignored, and invite a wide range of perspectives, cultures, languages, and customs into the life and decision-making of the school. They avoid the phenomenon of random acts of programming by integrating and aligning core instruction with expanded learning opportunities and comprehensive support services. Bolstered by the addition of a full-time coordinator and a matrix of internal and external relationships, they are poised to take on seemingly intractable challenges that no one entity is able to take on alone, such as reducing chronic absence or increasing post-secondary pathways for all students. It is these capacities to engage multiple stakeholders, to understand the needs and assets of their constituents, to develop adaptive, culturally competent solutions, to continuously improve, that set community schools apart from conventional schools. And at no other point in my career have I seen that difference play out so starkly as right now during the COVID era. Over the last 8 months, I've heard stories both locally and nationally of community schools stepping up, leveraging their partnerships in the community to support students and families during this unprecedented time. For example, some have developed or participated in food distribution initiatives, provided remote mental health counseling for those experiencing trauma, and even organized community Wi-Fi to ensure internet connectivity for all students. Perhaps most important, many report managing to maintain a higher level of engagement and communication with their students as compared to their non-community school peers. Through regular remote check-ins and socially distant home visits in some cases, they have worked tirelessly to address the gargantuan barriers to learning that the pandemic has created or exacerbated for too many children. Now, granted, these are anecdotes, but they align with the theory that engagement is a function of trust, and community schools build trust in spades. This past Friday, New York State recorded the most COVID-19 cases we've had in 6 months. Over 500,000 New Yorkers across the state have been infected overall, and more than 33,000 have perished to date due to COVID. Districts around the state have done the best they can, delaying openings, modifying physical spaces, and instituting remote and hybrid learning schedules. And of course, there are more questions than answers right now about the implications for budgets across the board. Despite all this uncertainty, however, and for all the reasons I've stated and then some, we need community schools now more than ever. Now more than ever. We need to invest in coordination now more than ever. A growing body of research has demonstrated the impact and the return on investment of community school coordinators who are positioned to amplify and connect the work of teachers, social workers, health providers, community partners, and others in support of students and families. We need to invest in programs and services now more than ever. The state must protect funding that supports elements of community schools, including after-school and summer programs, early education, school-based health, and mental health. And we need to invest in our most vulnerable communities now more than ever. We're all in this together. But we also know that particular communities were underserved and struggling before the pandemic and are now especially at risk. Let's be principled and strategic as we strive for equity and justice for students who don't have the resources to make up for lost time and learning this year. It's been a rough year. These days, it has been so difficult not to be discouraged. But I want to close here with what is giving me hope when I think about New York State and community schools. I'm hopeful because New York State has emerged as a national leader in the community schools movement. Thanks to a multifaceted advocacy campaign, we have spread this approach throughout the state, which, with its urban, suburban, and rural communities, is essentially a microcosm of the nation. I'm hopeful because our statewide community schools network stands out as one of the stronger coalitions in the country. So big shout out to the New York State Network for Youth Success and the many partners in the network for their strong, committed, steady leadership. I'm also hopeful because we recognize the importance of high quality implementation in New York State and have therefore built infrastructure statewide to provide capacity building via 3 regional technical assistance centers. And so allow me to recognize the great work of Binghamton University, Fordham University, and Rockland 21C for their efforts on that front. I'm hopeful because earlier this year, we made a huge contribution to the national research base of community schools when New York City's Office of Community Schools released an evaluation by the RAND Corporation that compellingly demonstrates the efficacy of the strategy after only 3 years of implementation. I'm hopeful because US Senator Kirsten Gillibrand joined Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio and Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland as a co-sponsor of the Full Service Community Schools Expansion Act of 2020, which was just introduced a couple of weeks ago. This bill calls for a significant increase of funding from the current level of roughly $30 million annually to an investment of $3.65 billion with a B over the next 5 years to plan, implement, expand, and support community schools serving low-income students across the country. And finally, I am hopeful because of all of you. It's very clear how much passion and purpose you are all bringing to this work to make good on our promise to students all over the state. Thank you for your efforts and for hanging in through these very tough times. I see you and I appreciate you. So I have very good reason to expect that New York State will continue to be leaders of this movement, that we will continue to invest in this strategy and continue to support and learn from each other as we go forward. Together, we can show what it looks like to be talent abundant and opportunity abundant. Thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of the convening.
Thank you, Abe. Please join me in thanking Abe. We really appreciate your words and bringing hope to us all this afternoon. We will be sure to share the resources, the RAND report that Abe mentioned about the New York City Community Schools Initiative is included in our resource list as well. And thank you again, and for all of your work supporting schools, youth, and families throughout the state and the country. We really appreciate you. Now we're about to hear from an inspiring panel, including a student and practitioners that operate community schools throughout the state. But before we do that, we're going to take a look at a video of a community school in Soda Central School District in New York. And we've been here for a few minutes now, so I'll encourage you, if you need to, use this as an opportunity to stand up, stretch, do what you need to do while we watch this 2-minute video.
Sodus is a rural community located off the 104 corridor, almost directly between Rochester and Syracuse. You take how our students are performing, and then you look at our poverty rate here in Sodus. We're over 70% of our students are receiving free or reduced rates. And we worry about that because we have a number of students who are having struggles outside of school that have a direct impact on how they do in school. And that's why the community schools effort is so important to us here at Sodus. Every decision we make, every dollar we spend, every idea that we generate somehow has to focus back on our kids. We rely on outside partners to help us make sure we're doing the best for our kids. We want our kids to be proud. We want our kids to be proud that they went to Sodus, that they grew up in a very small rural community, that they knew the names of every one of their classmates. It's inviting, it's embracing, it's working with all members of our community to do what's best for our kids. It's that simple. It's our school, it's our kids going out and being a part of the community, and it's the community, the agencies, the people coming into our school and helping. No matter what they do, no matter where they go, they are going to be able to compete at that next level with kids from all other schools in our region and across the country. It's opening up our school and letting people know that we're here for them, that we care for them, that we're willing to help support them in whatever it is that they need. That's the true meaning of community school.
That's such a powerful message, and thank you all for watching. At the end there, he's talking about opening up the school and letting folks know that he's there for them, the school's there for them, and going to help support them. And that's really what community schools are about. So thank you for watching. Let's play another round of trivia. Just like last time, you can enter your answers into the chat box. Where would community schools have the most impact? A, cities, B, suburbs, C, rural areas, D, all of the above. And I see some answers coming in. Give you all another moment. We're getting consensus on the Zoom side of things here. That is correct. The answer is D, all of the above again. In New York State, we have great examples of community schools in all of these settings, and there are benefits to each. We can go to the next slide. We're excited to have representatives from diverse settings on our next panel, so you can listen in for some of the benefits of the community schools strategy in each of these different diverse areas. We can go to the next slide. I am thrilled to introduce our moderator for our student and practitioner panel, Karen Alford. Karen is the Vice President of Elementary Schools at the United Federation of Teachers and the United Community Schools founder and board chair. A teacher, Karen believes that education is the great equalizer and that you can strengthen schools and strengthen communities. Advancing the union's United Community Schools initiative is therefore a natural fit. Leading a team of educators and staff, Karen continues to raise awareness about the importance of addressing the whole child, bringing partnerships into community learning pilot schools, and helping to transform schools into the hub of the community. Karen, I am going to spotlight you and turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Allie. And always a pleasure to see you. And Abe, so appreciated all your remarks. As we jump in and get started, I am so honored and humbled to be able to moderate this panel today. What I'm going to ask is the panelists, because you have to try to make Zoom as interesting as you can. And so after I talk about you and read some of your bio, I would love if you could tell me a color. How are you feeling today? So today I am yellow. It is beautiful outside. I am going to be speaking with some beautiful, amazing folks, and the light, the energy, all that the sun represents. I am so yellow and so excited to be with you today. So let's start. And Stella Maris Raffia. Stella Maris is a student leader and an alumna of Fannie Lou Hamer Freedom High School. Stella Maris credits her community school and her involvement through various children's aid opportunities for helping her connect with her community and growing as an individual. As a former student at Fannie Lou Hamer, she established a school-based pantry to support her community. As an alumna, she is currently working on a project to bring awareness to mental health in Black and Brown communities while pursuing her higher education goals at Medgar Evers College. Stella Maris, how are you feeling today? What's your color?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I will say the color that I'm feeling today is blue, meaning a little bit chill, cool. And I am happy to be on this panel. Thank you for having me.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you. Dr. Hennessy Lustica, welcome. She is the Community Schools Mental Health Director at Sodus Central School District. In her role, she increases mental health supports for students across a community schools consortium of rural school districts. Dr. Lustica has 17 years of experience as a school counselor, is licensed as a mental health counselor in New York State, and credentialed as an approved clinical supervisor by the National Board of Certified Counselors. Dr. Lustica uses her expertise in mental health and experience in educational systems to work diligently to develop leading theory and implement best practice school-based mental health support for kids and families. Hennessy, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. I think my color would also be bright blue. The windows behind me and the sun is shining up here in upstate New York and it's warm out, so it's a good day.
We're blue all over. Thank you. Rasan Staley, United Community Schools Senior Community School Director at Queens High School of Information Research and Technology. Rasan gives back to the community, connects partners to his school to strengthen academics, delivers food and vital health and wellness services, and facilitates greater family engagement. Rasan's family still lives in Far Rockaway, where they attend church and build connections with the surrounding community to advance the community schools model. Welcome, Rasan. How are you feeling today?
Thank you, Karen. Good afternoon, everyone. I was going to succumb to peer pressure and say blue. You see my background, but I'm going to go with purple. Purple is my favorite color, but I will say purple for the same reason. Today's a good day. Happy to be with you all, and purple puts me in that kind of mood. So good afternoon, everybody, again.
Excellent. Purple is royalty. Margie Tabor, good to have you today. Margie works at the Wayne County Department of Mental Health as a community schools coordinator, fostering collaborative partnership between the local Department of Health and the Wayne County Community Schools. Margie serves as a liaison between the school, behavioral health programs, and community, providing leadership for behavioral health for children. She is a certified youth mental health first aid instructor, CASIC 2, and life coach. Her work is about leaving a transformative imprint, causing a ripple effect that promotes positive change. Welcome, Margie.
Thank you. I was like, wow, that kind of goes with purple. And Rasan, I'm not copying you. I really had that written down. But it's a really bold and bright color, and it's a spiritual connection with me. And it just really highlights for me gratitude. And I'm really grateful to be here and to be a part of this.
We're grateful to have you.
Thank you.
And lastly, but certainly not least, Rudine Wright, educator, chapter leader. In other parts of the state, this is probably known as a building representative at PS 30 in Manhattan. Miss Wright is a native New Yorker and was born in Harlem and raised in and around the boroughs of New York City. She has served the Harlem community as a dedicated elementary school educator for more than 20 years. She's a leader among school staff, representing members as a UFT chapter leader, an elected position, twice awarded a 2-year District 5 mathematics teaching grant as an educator at PS 30. Prior to teaching at PS 30, Ms. Wright was a lead teacher of NEA award-winning Apollo Theater Oral History Project for grades 3 through 5. Welcome, Rudine. How are you today?
How are you, Karen? It's so good to see you, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity. And my color, I'm gonna stick with blue because I feel that way. Even when I got up this morning, I was like, okay, what color is gonna dictate the day? And it's blue.
Excellent, blue it is. So I'm gonna ask you all a few more questions, and to ensure that we adequately hear from each of you, I'm just gonna ask that you try to keep your remarks to 2 to 3 minutes to try to create a bit of an informal space, something a little bit more collegial. I'm going to address you by your first names. And I just like to ask that as we ask the questions, feel free to unmute and then go back on mute so we can try to cut down on some of the background noise. Okay? Okay, let's jump right in. So we're at this juncture where we've never seen before, truly uncharted territory in the midst of a pandemic. We've had to be creative, and if ever thinking outside the box has been warranted, this is certainly the time. With that said, what kinds of support does your community school offer, and how have they helped your school community step up to address students, families, and community needs during this time of a pandemic? Anybody like to jump in? Go ahead, Stella Maris.
Good afternoon once again. Being an alumni of Fatal New Hampshire High School, Unfortunately, I do not attend the high school, but I do keep in touch with the principal and as well the community. And one way that they have been going on with COVID is one-on-one support with teachers reaching out to the students. Another thing has been access to the pantry. So we talked about funding the pantry that I created when I was in high school. Everybody in the community has access to it during COVID to get food, hygiene products, clothes, and et cetera, and et cetera. College Now and partnerships, things like Children's Aid, internships, and programs have been shifted virtually for kids to have access, and also checking in to make sure the kids are actually doing their work, furthering their education, because now in the time of COVID, it's a little bit harder for kids to do their work. It's a little bit harder for teachers to get in communication with their students. So just having one-on-one check-ins and having access to little things as pantries and mental health check-ins is what Fannie Lou Hamer High School has been doing this time of COVID.
Thank you. As a mom of 2 children in public school, I always appreciate when the school checks in. That connectivity is so important. Would anybody else care to address that question? Go on, Hennessy.
Hi again, I hit unmute. One of the things that we were really interested in, and this is going back into like May and June, we were coming together a lot as educators across our consortium of districts and talking about what it would look like when kids came back to school, when that would be, what kinds of things from a mental health perspective we had to put into place. And what we discovered was we were missing one of the most important voices, and that was student voice. So together with our partners, we constructed a survey called the Youth Voice Survey 2020, and we worked with our area superintendents, and we were able to send that out to our students. We received over 3,000 responses from kids across 5 counties, and we asked lots of questions around social emotional wellness. We asked questions around anxiety and feeling lonely and feeling disconnected and feeling worried. And we surveyed kids in 4th through 8th grade, and we found the results were kind of comparable across the grades. So kids were really worried about their family members being sick. So 64% of kids were worried about their family members being sick. As reported, that was different from worrying about themselves being sick. They really were more focused on their family members. More than half were feeling more nervous and anxious than they had in the past. And over 50% were also feeling lonelier than they had in the past. And over 40% said that they weren't able to stop worrying. They were worrying all the time. So we took all of this information and we also sent out a parent survey at the same time. And from the parent survey, we found that parents were really underestimating the impact that this was having on their kids' mental health. So we were able to come together with our partners and share out to all the districts that took part in this survey and really look at the practices that we have in place through our multi-tiered systems of support and through our consortium of schools, and offer things like virtual restorative practice community circles to kids and to staff. And one of the things that we did in July was we brought together a group of students from all different districts with our New York State Legislature, Brian Mankelo, and he was able to come and sit. And we were, this was the first time the kids had come back together at all. So we were in this giant gym and we were really socially distanced and everybody had their masks on. And, kids really talked about how much they miss their teachers, how much they miss their activities. They talked about, for the most part, they were happy to be home with their family, but they really missed, they missed their friends. They felt lonely. And it was really a space where they were able to come together and talk for the first time about how they were feeling with school buildings being closed. We were able to do a press release from that and, you really use that data to help our districts and our community partners come together to prepare for what we needed in terms of interventions in September when kids came back.
Thank you. Also necessary and needed. Rasan, as a high school person, how was that? How has it been going?
Oh, young adults are so interesting in any setting. Well, one of the things more recently we've been able to institute has been a grocery grab and go. We've kind of created a mobile pantry of sorts. Our school is co-located with 3 others on campus, and we've been able to serve upwards of 60 or 70 families over the last month or so, providing them fresh produce and sort of other items just to kind of lend additional support. The Rockaways, like every community, is a very nuanced community, and folks like to go in areas where they are most comfortable. And so because people have felt so disconnected from the campus, it's also been an opportunity for families to come up and still kind of feel a part of the school community while receiving that other support. The other thing that I'd like to share, hopefully it won't go over my, or definitely won't go over my 2 minutes because Karen will get me. But at the beginning of the pandemic, something that was very important to us, of course, sort of high at the list of needs has been mental health for everyone. But we were able to institute a number of mental health supports for not only our parents, but our staff members as well. And we created what was known as Wellness Wednesdays for our school. And it really was just an opportunity for our staff members, teachers, school aides, to just hop on a Google Meets call and sort of just unload. You know, at the beginning of all this, of course, folks were anxious for a number of reasons. And this was just a safe space that we were able to provide with a partner. And it was very fluid. Initially, we wanted to be like very regimented and institute all of these practices. And then after a few sessions, we just realized that people just needed a safe space to just kind of unload and get it all off of them. And that was something that really helped our school community kind of navigate the early parts of this moment and gave them some confidence to move forward into what was going to be ahead of the work.
Yeah, I think what we've all learned over these months is it's okay to not be okay. And all of the outreach that you all have been doing, from the surveys to the Wellness Wednesdays to bringing people together, making sure that we connect, even via Zoom sometimes, has been helping, I think, to uplift all of us. Let's dive into another question. Margie, community schools were here before COVID. They'll be here after. But considering pre-current and post-pandemic, what are some of the challenges your community school is facing as it works to provide vital services to students and families?
I think initially, pre-posting COVID, I think I'll present with different scenario opportunities. And I'm going to speak probably because I've just been embedded in the COVID for months. You know, the challenge has been like basic needs. We live in a rural community. Our community schools model, it's not uncommon to think that we have families who live in areas where there is not even internet connection. So how to be able to support those students who may be on virtual learning. All of our schools have different virtual schedules, from full 100% in-person to hybrid to virtual. And so how to support the families around ensuring the support for the students to be able to get their academic needs met, how to bring access to the mental health services, whether those programs that were already existing in the schools or within the community, but also even just going to the basic needs of family. As far as food links, we have food connected with Food Link, and every Tuesday throughout our county, families can sign up to go and get food distribution. And then the other thing that we did is we started a COVID task force that meets monthly, and we bring all the key players together of the schools, the community, mental health, the DSS, all of the agencies that would be involved in supporting families, coming together to take a look at where have we been, where are we at now, and what do we anticipate moving forward? Because the communities we're in, our numbers are going up as far as COVID positives. So, you know, it's always on the radar. Are schools closing? Are we going to be going down to virtual, you know, learning? And then what does that look like? What are the needs of the families? And how can we be there to accommodate them? Realizing that if families don't have the basic needs met, all of the other things that we're working to support, we can't even begin to address.
Rudine, and in Harlem at PS 30.
Well, for us, you know, even with pre-COVID, I think a lot of the concerns were being able to meet our families' needs as well as our students' needs academically, and getting our shareholders to really buy in and see the sustainability with regard to what the community has to offer. You know, this is a place of a lot of history, and it's been through a number of changes, and it's going to continue to go through changes, especially now. I think budget concerns, you know, because it not only impacts money, not only in finances, not only impact the school, but it affects the area in which we are in. So if our stakeholders lose out, so do we, you know, and being able to have them be supported through various other agencies and organizations enable us to continue to go to them and say, you know, will you help us? You know, and also the buy-in and being able to stay within the community as it grows and moves forward. We've offered a lot of programs to our students during those 7-8 months with regard to teaching artists. You guys were very good in bringing in the teaching artists to help our kids with yoga, with regard to dance and music. It was such a good thing to be able to have those platforms to be able to help them continue to connect. And I think connection within a community is a very strong and powerful thing, because it means that we're all one people, you know, regardless of how we've been inducted into different areas, we are still one people, one connection, being able to help each other, because one thing impacts the other, you know, and I impact you, you impact me. What you do well, I'm going to do well, because when you know better, you do better, and you step up and you lend that helping hand. No matter whether there's a crisis or not, you're going to be there to get that support.
Thank you. And we have that saying in my office all the time: when you know better, you do better. And you touched upon stakeholders. I think we realize that we can't do this work in a vacuum. And that's what I'm hearing from you all. And we had needs before, and if anything, they've been heightened. Yo, I'm so sorry. I don't know if you can hear all of the work going on outside of my house right now, of all days that Con Ed would pick to be here. So I'm going to ask my question quickly and go back on mute. But as I was saying, we don't do this work alone. We can't do it in a vacuum or siloed. And certainly, you know, stakeholders, that term has been mentioned. And our final question: we know that we're all interconnected, and it certainly takes many hands, hearts, and allies to get this work done. In what ways are community schools uniquely positioned to help chart a vision for reimagining a high quality, safe, and equitable education in New York? What supports must New York State provide to community schools to help them see this vision come to fruition? Yes, Hennessy.
So for me, when I think about community schools, I think a lot about collaboration and how community schools are uniquely positioned to bring together the families and the community and the school and all of those voices. You know, equity requires voice, and community schools are positioned in a place where we can activate youth voice, we can activate family voice, we can activate the school voice, and support requires trust. So community schools can also be a place where trust is built. I think that we spend, at least in my position, we spend a lot of our time, you know, building trust, building relationships with the different stakeholders in our community. And that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, is that collaboration for me. And what can New York State do? I guess, you know, work on reducing barriers, you know, between offices that support families and support youth. I think that I say there's enough to go around a lot for those people that work with me. So really working on how to build that collaboration piece is going to be very important.
Yes, Rasan and then Stella Maris.
Just to hop on Hennessy's point around collaboration, I started this work in 2014 as the Rockaway community was rebuilding from Superstorm Sandy. And growing up out there, it was always a very sort of underserved community. And what I did notice at that moment, when I came in and began this work, people were concerned about the consistency of someone else coming in. Even though I was from the community, here's this outside agency kind of taking interest on us when it's convenient for you, but are you still going to be here? And here I am 7 school years later, thankfully still in the position to have created sort of this network along with a number of other agencies that have come onto the peninsula since that tragedy. Sort of one of the good things that came out of it sort of was this fishnet that we were able to create for students and for families and for the community as a whole. And I think, as Hennessy said, community schools are uniquely in a place to kind of bridge all of these gaps where there are folks who have sort of these pipe dreams about what they would love to see in a school, or folks that are in a housing development having dreams about what they would love for their children to have access to. We are uniquely positioned to have relationships sort of all across these communities to build these bridges. And to, I guess, second her point around what the state can do is just the increase in accessibility. You know, you're talking about an underserved community. We have a large, an increasing number of an immigrant population on the peninsula as well. And just the idea of finding creative ways to include and become more inclusive to all parts of the community is huge. And sort of, I know that, you know, it's easier said than done, but sort of looking in a perfect world down the road, just the accessibility piece to everyone in a community is something that would be crucial to really improving our work.
Thank you. Stella Maris?
Just to agree with what everyone has said so far, a little background about me. My family is actually from Nigeria, so I'm not even from American soil. And when I started my education here, I was in Wisconsin for my first year of high school. And I moved back into New York, came back to the Bronx, and I went to Fannie Lou Hamer High School for the rest of my schooling. And that's what I really learned what a community school was. And when we think about education, we always think about grades. We think about, oh, you need math and science. You need to have certain grades to get into college. But really the question is, how do you apply these classes to critical learning, and how do you apply it to your life? And that is what I got from Fannie Lou Hamer High School. When we talked about mathematics, we didn't just learn about algebraic equations. We talked about how did this algebraic equation have to do with tiling the floors, and how does that apply to your life? Thinking critically about what is being taught into schools. So in this community, when we talk about community schooling, I look at it as having a connection, not just saying, hey, that's my teacher, her name is Miss Ross, but do you have a connection? Does she care about your mental health? Does she care about the access to education that you have? Does she care about what you do not have and what you don't have. It's more than just knowing your students' names. It's more about what they need to succeed. And that is what a community school is. So when we think about funding, when we think about how to rise and increase community school, is really about access. Disproportionality in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, in Black communities are real. How are we going to support these children is the question. Making sure there is a connection between having a relationship with students and teachers, and also having access. So we talked about mental health. Mental health is one thing. Another thing is technology. Another thing is boys and girls clubs. Do we have that in every community? Do we have free access to textbooks, tutors? Because when we think about it, it's more than just, education. It's more than just passing the class, but do you just have the tools? So just hearing my story, my parents are from Nigeria. My mom had to work for everything that she had. When I got into high school, I had to work 10 times harder. And it was because of places like Children's Aid, my community school, that I'm actually where I am now. Me earning a $40,000 scholarship was not because of my grades. Maybe it was, but it was also because I was able to have access to Madison Square Garden. I had access to internships. I had access to all different community resources. And this is something that all kids should have, because I would not have been in college now if it wasn't for all of my accesses. So it's really partnerships. How can we increase partnerships in these communities?
Stella Maris, you are pretty amazing. So I am sure that all that's come to you is a lot about who you are as a person. So ladies, we have about 6 minutes left. And so Margie, I'm gonna let you respond, and we're gonna end with Rudine.
Okay, thank you. I just want to piggyback what's been said, that as we focus on looking at community schools, so my role as a community schools coordinator for behavioral health is also taking a look at the services that are both in the school and within the community, and anticipating what the needs are. And I think what's important, I tend to call it emotional wellness. How are we looking at overall emotional wellness? Because there is the therapeutic clinical component to it, but there's lots of other resources that can be utilized, whether it's relationship building, physical activity, sports, reading, different things that can support one's emotional wellness beyond just looking at mental health. And I mean, I've worked in the mental health field for 25 years or more, and it can oftentimes be a silo, and it's really important in building the relationships with other organizations in the community so that we realize that there's enough work out there to go around. So let's take a look at what our strengths are, capitalize on them, and build on it from that for the support in what's best with the community, not what we think our organization is. And the last thing I want to put a plug out about in this context that I think we've worked on here with the Wayne County Community Schools Initiative is that in midst of COVID, we have staff that are giving all they can give right now that have been impacted by COVID. So while we take a look at how to support the students and families, I think we can't forget about the fact that we have staff showing up for work every day, whether it's coming into the school or being available virtually, who have been impacted in some way. And I think with the work Hennessy and I are doing, we've really tried to be able to put that support out there for the professionals that are doing this work to help lift them up. Because the more the professionals have a resiliency toolkit, the more we can hopefully build that on with the students, and it just is a win-win situation.
Well said, well said. Rudine?
Oh, that young lady spoke to my heart, because that is what she said is why I, as an educator, remain within the Harlem community and the school that I'm in, because everything I've seen community schools do for its community. The bridge that we have between our parents, just that level of communication has been strengthened due to this pandemic. I mean, the fact that I'm on the phone with my parents at 9 a.m, getting the kids up and ready. The fact that I've seen teachers give so much of themselves, including myself, to various programs to be here for these children, post-COVID and now. I think that the state must build on its current investment to implement and expand the community school strategy, because we bring and have brought so much to the community. I mean, listening to this young woman is like, every time I think about pulling back from this and the work that I've done, I know that I've been called to do the work. And I keep encountering people who have been called to do this work. And we dedicate ourselves to our families, to our students. I mean, when I walk the streets, I see my kids and I see them come up to me and say, I'm in college now, and I'm thinking I'm too old for this, but it is such a joy, and you have to take joy and pride in what you bring to your community, no matter what happens, because you are there for that community. You're the one that those kids are going to reach out to. You're the one who's concerned about them when they don't show up. You're the one that tells them happy birthday when nobody else does. And having this within that community and giving them access, like she said, access to yoga, access to places like Madison Square Garden. When I worked at the Apollo Theater, the kids had never even been, and they lived in the neighborhood. To be on that stage for graduation, to be on that stage to produce shows, that is something they can take pride in, because people from all over the world come here for the history that they've learned about. Here we are in the midst of it, and we need to take more advantage of it. And the state needs to recognize that, because they need to be able to protect the funds that come in and provide more funding for us.
Well, I thank you all so much. I am yellow all over. I am so warm because of your remarks. And as we wrap up, I just like to say, whether you're in the city, a rural, suburban community, it doesn't matter. And what I've heard from you all is community schools are so much bigger than academics. It's about providing access. It's about making sure basic needs are met, food distributions are happening, emotional wellness is present in our schools, that there's equity, that there is active voice and trust in our buildings, consistency over convenience, you all have said, that we are the gap bridgers. And lastly, that we are investing in relationships in students and families. And it's because of all of those reasons that community schools thrive and truly uplift and strengthen our children, our families, and our whole communities. Thank you all so much for our panel today.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our panel. I wish we had time to continue with hearing from them and their experiences this afternoon. Such wonderful insight. And it's just so incredible to hear from folks firsthand about their experience. All right. Okay, all set. Thank you again for being with us to share your stories. Before we move on, our legislative panel is coming up next, but we're going to take a look at another video. This time, we're going to see a highlight of a community school in New York City. So again, please feel free to use this 3.5-minute video as an opportunity to stand, stretch, take care of your needs while you watch. We'll get that started now.
You're looking at the whole child. You have to look at the medical. You have to look at the dental. You have to look at the social emotional learning. You have to look at the family.
It's about recognizing that not every student is showing up in the school with the same set of experiences and the same set of opportunities.
If they're not mentally ready or socially ready, the academics not going to reach them.
And this is why partnerships like the community schools is so important.
It's about acknowledging that schools need to support the whole child and that schools cannot do it alone. A school partners with a community-based organization and they take stock of what the strengths are of their community, what the different resources are that are available, and then what the needs are of their students and families. And then together they design a set of interventions and programs and initiatives that meet those needs and leverage those assets.
We had a high chronic absent rate of 24% when we first started looking and identifying this as a problem.
I just received New York State ELA and math scores, and our school didn't do so well. And I started seeing there was a correlation between the chronic absenteeism in the testing grades, and we started the chronic absenteeism committee. But we analyze that data, we talk about it, and then we do different things throughout the school year. We've noticed that there's a decrease in our chronic absenteeism and an increase in our student performance in state exams. We have done other things as well. We've changed the curriculum in literacy and math, bring in more professional learning for teachers and also for the parents. We've given them support on how to help their kids at home.
Our parents are involved. They're a part of everything that we do here.
Yo tengo dos niños que vienen a la escuela PSA. Tienen talleres, estamos involucrados allí. Tener aquí la enfermería, tenemos incluso al dentista. Todo como necesita, ellos lo ayudan, lo apoyan en toda manera.
So core to community schools is collaborative leadership.
Staff collaboration is strong.
Because then you can really push the kinds of things that you want to see in the community, the kinds of changes that you want to see in the children, the changes that you want for them and that the parents also want for them.
It's just a really fun school. I love my principal. I love after school. We get to do arts and crafts, music, dance, gymnasium. We were recently doing a vision test and one of my friends got glasses. If you have cavities, I do a fill-in.
They care about what you want to learn and what you want to be when you grow up. I want to be a doctor. PSA teaches me how I can care about others and prevent sicknesses.
In order to focus on the math or in order to focus on science, you need to make sure that these immediate needs are met. And having a community school to bring in those resources, it just makes sense.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that video. I think it really helps highlight how community schools can target specific issues, things like chronic absenteeism, and bring together partners to address those issues and the importance of all of the different aspects of community schools, things like getting students dental services and vision services and glasses when they need it. So thanks for taking a look at that with us. I'd like to play one last round of trivia before our legislators share with us. So we're going to put that up on the screen. What is the level of state investment in community schools aid in this current budget? Is it A, 50 million, B, 100 million, C, 250 million, or D, 500 million? And you can utilize the chat box again. If you don't know, you can take a guess. Give just a moment for folks to think about it. Right, I'm seeing some answers coming in. Yes, the answer is C, $250 million. That funding is set aside within the foundation aid for certain school districts. So now it is my pleasure to introduce the moderator for our legislators panel. go to the next slide. Jackie Paredes is a senior legislative representative at the New York State United Teachers. In her role, she analyzes and lobbies policy bills in the areas of pre-K through 12 public education, which includes special education, teacher centers, professional development, charter schools, and BOCES legislation. In the past, Paredes has served as president of her son's PTA at the Delaware Community School, home to the dual language program in Albany, and helped create a voluntary after-school program that serviced 100 students in reading literacy. Thank you, Jackie, for being with us today. And I am going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Allie. And thank you, Karen, for moderating that great panel. From Rasan to Stella to Radine, you guys are just completely motivating me, uplifting me even more every single day. So thank you so much for all that you do, your vision, and for being a leader within our communities. I just wanted to also thank the legislators who are able to join us today. I'm going to briefly introduce them, and I'll give them 1 whole minute if they'd like to say anything after the very brief introduction. However, if you do go over the minute, I am not going to be as nice as Karen, even though none of the panelists did go over. I will have to use the bullhorn. Please don't make me use the bullhorn. I will start off first with Senator Shelley Mayer. Senator Shelley Mayer represents the 37th Senate District of New York, which includes portion of Westchester County, including the cities of Yonkers, White Plains, New Rochelle, and Rye. Senator Mayer was elected to the New York State Senate in April 2018 in a special election, and she was subsequently reelected in November 2018. Prior to her time in the state Senate, she did serve in the New York State Assembly for 6 years. Senator Mayer currently serves as the chair of the Senate Education Committee. Senator Mayer, I know that you're on the line with us. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
Well, thank you, Jackie, and thank you everyone for having us. I know you have us to a strict minute. One thing even a little bit I was on before I got the passion about the community school world, and I know it firsthand. I'm so in awe of what you do and the fact you give 150% to these kids every day in the most challenging time in our lives and the most important time in their lives. So thank you, and I look forward to having a productive conversation.
Thank you so much, Senator. Next, I'd like to introduce to you Assemblymember Andrew Hevesy. He represents the 28th Assembly District in Queens, which includes Forest Hill, Rego Park, Ridgewood, Richmond Hill, Middle Village, Glendale, and Kew Gardens. He was first elected to the Assembly in 2005. Assemblyman Hevesy currently serves as the chair of the Assembly Committee on Social Services and other committees as well. Assemblyman Hevesy, thank you so much for joining us. And is there anything else that you'd like to include?
Sure. First, thank you, Jackie, for having me. Thank you to Allie and Kelly for setting this up. Hello, everybody. One problem I have is that picture you have of me. I look like I'm about 12 years old. So, that's why I'm attempting to grow a beard. That's not working either, apparently. Look, the reason why I'm really focused on the potential for community schools is the following. As chair of the Social Services Committee, I have a very upfront view of some of the most difficult societal problems we face, from people winding up on public assistance, winding up in the criminal justice system, winding up homeless, some of the most different societal problems that we have. And I have come to believe over the last couple of years that the prime driver of that are adverse childhood experiences. The trauma that kids have to face that changes the functioning and actually the structure of their developing brains, which cause them to not be able to study. That is the linchpin that I believe all policymakers should be focusing on, and one of the great modalities to address that is community schools. So I'll be looking at it from that angle. But I thank you for having me and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Hevesy.
And last but not least, we have Senator Robert Jackson. Senator Jackson represents the 31st District in Manhattan. He was elected to the New York State Senate in 2018, and he previously served as a school board president and on the New York City Council for many years. Senator Jackson is chair of the Senate Committee on Cities, and he's also a member on the Education and the New York City Education Committee in the Senate. Senator Jackson, is there anything else that you would like to add? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me and having us here in this panel. I was on when you first started at 2 o'clock and had the opportunity to refocus on community schools. By the way, the first community school in New York City started in District 6 when I was the president of Community School Board 6. And we've been fighting on a continuous basis to ensure that every child, no matter who you are, receives the opportunity to get a good education. And that's what the Campaign for Fiscal Equity lawsuit was about. People made reference to the fact that the $250 million in community schools is part of the foundation aid formula, and we're still fighting for billions of dollars that our children are entitled. So the struggle continues every single day, and I'm part of it. As the chair of the Cities Committee and involved in all education committees in the New York State Senate.
Great, well, thank you so much. And Radine touched a little bit upon when she was ending her panel. And I want to make sure, you know, collaboration within community schools is extremely important. And legislators are part of that collaboration. As we say, it takes a village, and legislators are definitely instrumental in helping bring the tools into that village that is needed. So we are very, very grateful for everything that the New York State legislators does. And we're grateful for all of your leadership who are here on the call today. I also wanted to just start off with a question. What are the 2 to 3 critical services students, parents, and communities in your district need? We know that all of you represent very different districts and have various needs, especially amid COVID-19. And how do you see community schools working to address those needs? Senator Mayer, would you like to go first, or?
Sure, I mean, it's
okay.
It's a pleasure to be here with Senator Jackson and Assemblyman Hevesy. We've all worked closely together in the past. And I would just set the backdrop. You know, we in the legislature, the Democratic majorities in the Senate and the Assembly, are absolutely committed to getting the money that is owed to schools under the Foundation Aid formula when it was adopted in 2007 as a response to the successful lawsuit, AQE's lawsuit, which Robert Jackson was the lead plaintiff for many years, Senator Jackson. So we start with the premise that our schools are underfunded given what they are owed under the law. Whether people agree or not, the law says it was to be funded in 3 years and it hasn't been. That's the starting point. Then on top of that, we have this incredible challenge of COVID for our students and our schools. And so before COVID, I had gone around the state doing a series of roundtables to say, what is the dominant issue for schools, parents, teachers, and others that is not met by the inequities in the Foundation Aid formula and the failure to fully fund it? And mental health was then, pre-COVID, the #1 issue for schools. And we fought in the Senate and the Assembly to get $10 million added as a down payment on additional funds for mental health services. In the COVID era, and I know I just got off the phone with the superintendent of one of my schools that is closed now because of a high incidence, the interruption in learning, particularly for our special needs school, students, and the disparities that were present previously among our school districts between low funded districts and high need districts and the others are all exacerbated. So we need the funding, we need additional mental health services, we need the ability to do remote learning, and we need the range of supports that community schools successfully provide, as was described before, to students who need, as Mr. Hevesy said, they need all the elements of social support, and so they need to be incorporated into the school environment.
Assemblyman Hebbis, would you like to continue?
Yeah, thank you. So thank you to Chairwoman Mayer for all of the work that she's been doing, and also to Senator Jackson. I've been watching Senator Jackson fight for CFE funding since he's, how many years in the council? He was 8 years in the council and has now been fighting for it as a senator. I have the privilege of admiring his work. And I'm going to take 1 second to also, I see on the call is another member of the New York State Assembly, Assemblymember Buttenshaw. So I wanted to welcome Marianne as well. So the quick answer to your question, what services, the answer is whatever services the children provide. And I don't want you to think I'm just blowing you off, but I got to talk about the social safety net for a minute so we can discuss what services are required. So pre-COVID, we had not in New York State made an investment in social services throughout New York State significantly in decades. And the Cuomo administration has not invested in social services at all pre-COVID. Now you have COVID hit, and everything you're worried about, all of the social ills has skyrocketed. So you're seeing domestic violence rates go through the roof. You're seeing child abuse rates probably go through the roof, but we're not sure because our mandated reporters are not getting access to the kids. So we don't know that. Food insecurity has been going through the roof. And then let's also acknowledge that the communities that are hit the hardest by these are Black and Brown communities. So if you're a child in a Black and Brown community, you are twice as likely to have a parent or a caregiver die. If you are a child in a Black and Brown community, you are 3 to 4 times as likely to be food insecure. So you get the sense of how every societal problem we have is getting worse. Now, before I get to the role of community schools, let me just tell you where the safety net is. Our safety net, our social safety net, where we provide food, we provide childcare, healthcare, alcohol and substance abuse, mental health. It is being shrunk as we speak every day because New York State is now broke. And until we have help from the federal government, we don't have money. So the Cuomo administration has been cutting funds to social services programs, which is why we've lost, 600 some odd childcare providers, which is why we've lost 1/3 of our capacity to deliver food to food insecure people. And I could go on and on about how the safety net is dying slowly because we're not investing. And we could actually invest now. That's another part of the fight. There's money that the government, Governor Cuomo is sitting on from the CARES Act that he could be spending to help these social services. Now, to community schools, I believe community schools having access to those kids and families can get the services directly to the families, directly to the kids, which will help them and their families navigate the school system, which is very tough and has been become exponentially more difficult since COVID. So I think community schools not only has an existing role to play, but has a growing potential role to play as we are having trouble getting services to these kids.
Thank you so much. Senator Jackson?
Well, you say, what are the 2 to 3 critical services for students, parents, and the community? And people ask me, what are the major issues? And I tell you, quite frankly, it's food insecurity. People have to eat, and lines are around the corner. And then you talk about housing. You have to have shelter over your head, and you have to have health care. These are critical, even before education, because that's formed the foundation for the children to survive and the family to be stabilized. And we have to have stable families, else we're in constant conflict on a continuous basis. And so how does that work? We have to have the funds. And that's why from a operations point of view, the legislature, both the Assembly and the Senate, we're looking at taxing the wealthiest New Yorkers in order to help the rest of New Yorkers survive. I've heard some of the other panelists in an earlier presentation between 2 and 3, in some rural areas, they don't even have internet service. And even in New York City, there's so many people without internet. Recently talking about de Blasio and what have you, and about internet for children that are in shelters. And there's over 75,000 people that don't even have, iPads and what have you. So obviously, the most critical thing is food, shelter, healthcare. That's the most critical. But you got to have the funds in order to carry that out. And that's why it's important that we work together to make sure that we do what we have to do. Obviously, we're hoping from the federal government. And then if the federal government, now that we know that Biden-Harris is going to come into the office on January 20th, we just we know that they're going to do something, not only for New York City and New York State, but around the entire country is in need, obviously. And so that's important. But let me just say to all of you, the electoral process, you may not want to talk about that, but that's a harsh reality that we must address. I said that there's 3 priorities. The priority was Biden-Harris, #1. And then #2, not the House of Representatives, meaning members of Congress, but the US Senate. And then 3rd, not even the House of Representatives, but the New York State Senate, because we don't have enough, if necessary, if in fact there's a budget item that gives us the money and the assembly members pass it, we don't have enough to override the governor's veto. And that's talking hard facts that we must realize. And so that's what this was about. And those are the priorities: 1, 2, 3, food insecurity, housing, and healthcare.
Thank you so much. And as all of you discussed the various needs that the different communities throughout New York State needs, I think it definitely goes to show how diverse our state is and how we need to maximize as much, tools necessary in order for our communities to move forward and to address the needs that they all require. So as we address the needs, now I wanted to pivot a little bit. In what ways are community schools uniquely positioned to help chart a vision for reimagining a high quality, safe, and equitable education in our great state? Senator Jackson, would you like to start for us?
Sure, I'll start. I just say that when you look at community schools and you had the video on PS8, which is in my district, the community school started at IS 218 in Washington Heights under Betty Rosa when she was the principal. Now you know that she is the interim superintendent, chancellor rather. But what we need is you have the individuals that are involved with that. So we need to have them involved in reimagining under basically the whole COVID-19 pandemic. But in essence, they were doing all of the things that were appropriate. And now we just need to make sure that they have the resources in order to do it. One of the things that when Carmen De La Rosa and myself, when we visited PS8 about a year ago, and the first time they ever had what do you call it? A program, and they had a teacher, and they won citywide champs on that. And the first year in, but they had to lay off that teacher. And so that teacher was not there in order to continue to feed these young minds and bodies all of the type of things as far as technology is concerned. And so I think that all of the elements are there with all of the staff that are involved. We have to make sure they don't go anywhere. We have to make sure that they don't lay off anybody in order to work collaboratively with each other and make recommendations to the state legislature as far as funding. $250 million is a drop in the bucket, and we know that. And we need to say that. It's not acceptable.
Okay. Senator Mayer, would you like to discuss in what ways you think community schools are uniquely positioned to help chart a vision for reimagining a quality education in our great state?
Well, I think, you raised the point of the diversity within our state. And I just want to speak as someone who represents cities outside of New York City, some of which have community schools like Yonkers and some which don't, like Portchester, which is not a city, but is desperately in need of the support services. The fact is that community schools were a model ahead of its time, in the sense that now in COVID, all of a sudden schools are waking up, oh, you mean kids need to be fed? And they were fed through school? Oh, you mean they needed this range of support services that community schools provided, and we were sort of took it for granted? We can't take it for granted. In fact, we have to use this moment to build on the community school model and expand it, because we have seen during COVID that schools, particularly community schools, have played such a central part in these families' lives. I look at a district like mine, the village of Portchester, 70% Latino students, with a school district that is still controlled by sort of the same old folks. And they need to move to the community school model. They absolutely need food, support, social support, after school, the range of emotional supports and health supports that you're talking about. So I think the community school model is the model we need to replicate and expand. And that's we can only do it, Senator Jackson said, by funding and making it a priority. It can't be an afterthought, which unfortunately it's been stuck being, we fight to preserve what we can in funding, and even though it's not good enough, we fight to do the best we can. So being funneled into foundation aid means there's not a separate dedicated funding stream that we can ensure goes to community schools and build. So that's going to be a challenge this year when we don't have money, and that's why this importance of the politics.
This question from Senator John Liu. Hi, how are you?
The politics is so important.
Senator Liu,
I hear Senator Liu.
It's going to be available at 4:30. Is it going to be too late? All right, so 4:30. Phone interview, right? Phone? Yeah. So what number should I?
Eugene, can you mute yourself? We're in the panel.
Can you mute yourself in Senator Liu's office?
She did, Shelley.
Okay, all right, that's it for me, Jackie.
Thank you so much. Assemblyman Hepesi?
That's tough to follow. Can I answer a question from the first panel just to start it off about what color I like? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Is it just me, or is the world feel better and lighter since Saturday night? I'm just saying. I have to get that out there. So I've had a dark cloud over us for quite some time. So I just wanted to get that out there. The answer to your question is, look, I think community schools are perfectly situated to provide social services, which are going to be needed now more than ever. And I also happen to believe that in crisis, there's opportunity. Now, this COVID has been terrible. But now that we are talking about new funding streams from the federal government, and I agree with Senator Jackson, now that we're talking about new funding streams by increasing various different kinds of taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers, now you're in the game. Now you get these funding streams that you can start playing. All right, what's the best bang for our buck? And I think there is a very good case to be made that you can help kids with their educations and their future and save yourself long-term costs by avoiding societal problems, by investing in community schools. And if you have that kind of long-term thinking, you will be able to document that if you provide the services to these kids and you help them with the education that they need, then they are exponentially going to be less likely to wind up in the criminal justice system, wind up homeless, wind up on public assistance, wind up having alcohol and substance abuse, wind up having healthcare problems because they have untreated ACEs. This is a real opportunity for us to do some long-term thinking by using the new funding streams that we're going to start discussing in the next month or two. So I'm excited to go back to Albany with my colleagues and start talking about community schools.
Thank you. And now comes the bigger question. And Senator Robert Jackson touched a little bit on the current political and socio-economic climate. You know, years and years ago, when I first started at NYS, I'll never forget when Randy Weingarten, our now national president, started talking about community schools and started saying how, hey, schools need to be able to provide additional resources, and how folks on the outside just didn't understand that concept and said, oh, teachers now want to do everything except teach. You know, and how far we've come, right? Where community schools is actually a model that just about all states, you know, could benefit from if they had community schools in their districts. So how is the current political, social, and economic climate going to affect community schools? And what can the state do to ensure that we're investing in community schools? Senator Jackson, would you like to lead that discussion? Well, how about we start then with Assemblyman Hevesi?
You can. I'll be glad.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear. I didn't know if you were on. I'm sorry.
But when you were posing the question, I was thinking about my daughter, who is an educator in Virginia. And as you know, that's a right to work state. I don't need to tell you, and she, one of the first things she did, she's now an assistant principal. She is a math specialist. She took clothes and took it to the clothes drive at the school. And so even my other sister, my other daughter who has younger kids, they take the clothes and they take them to school for children that need them. So we have to all work collaboratively together on this. And the situation economically is so bad compared to prior to COVID-19. And the economic situation is so devastating compared to prior to COVID-19. I heard this morning that the Dow is going up like 1,200 points. And I said, yeah, go up more, because hopefully that'll get jobs going. And then the engine can start working and people can get employed, you know, and to earn some money. But also, I just think that we as legislators have to be willing to go back and fight the good fight to make sure that we provide the funds for education so that we can have community schools and affordable housing and healthcare. And these are the things that we're going to have to fight for. And hopefully we have enough to make sure that the governor, we smile at our governor and say, Governor, you got to come on board. This is all of us in here together. And hopefully he will smile and say, you're absolutely correct and I'm on board. And if not, then we got to do what we got to do. And I turn it to my colleagues.
Great. Assemblyman Hevesy?
So it's a really good question. Let me answer it this way. There are two things that I think we need to focus on, but let me just tell you, good elected officials learn from their mistakes, okay? Everybody in life who learns from their mistakes is going to be better off, but I particularly think that's important for elected officials. I believe that what New York State has been doing for the last decade is so myopic. We are caught in the trap that many elected officials get into, which is we only look to solve the problem that's right in front of us, and we never think about the long term. Elected officials are trained to do that. I got a problem, I'll deal with it. Okay, now I can move on because there's always 30 more problems. The problem with that is it has led New York State to focus on balancing its budgets by imposing a phony 2% cap on state spending every year, which affects this conversation because it means even when we had money, and we had money, even when we had money over the last couple of years, we weren't allowed to spend it. And what happens is, that means that even if you're seeing problems increase, you're only allowed to keep the same amount of money. So you can say that that's fiscally responsible. Maybe that's fiscally responsible for that year, but in future years and out years where you're costing yourselves more money because you're going to have to pay for more expensive services, that is remarkably bad budgeting. It hurts the taxpayers and it hurts the people you're supposed to be hurting. And then the other thing, we have to learn from what just happened. COVID just made everything, and I mean everything that we were dealing with before, exponentially more difficult. And if we go back and don't acknowledge that we really have to start investing in some things to save a generation from the problems they're going to have in the future, then we will have failed as government. We need to acknowledge the breadth and scope of what just happened and how bad it is, and then look to modalities like community schools to make our way out of it.
Thank you so much. Senator Mayer?
Well, I think there's a few things. One, in terms of the opportunity presented by this crisis, it is the recognition by people outside of the education community that schools are absolutely essential. They sort of got pushed to the side. Oh, they cost money, they cost too much money, they don't do well enough. Everyone backed up and said, are you kidding? How is everybody going to go to work? No one can work if there isn't school. School has to be full day. School has to provide food. All these things that you in the community school movement have been talking about, the rest of the non-school world sort of realized, uh-oh, what if our kids are going to fall behind? What's going to happen to our special ed kids who aren't going to get what they need? What's going to happen to our kids in cities or towns or villages or rural communities that are disproportionately hit by this? So one, it made schools more important. And that is good for our politics, as Senator Jackson said, and Mr. Hevesy, because we have to fight to say, no, wait a minute. Schools are our top priority. We can't just, we did the best we could when there's no money, that's true. Now we have to have a longer range vision that involves schools. Two, we have been screwed by the federal government. Schools got no funding. We had a two-legged system, property taxes in the suburbs, a little bit of, money from the city of New York and the state. We are missing the third piece, which is federal funding for our schools. It is absolutely essential. They could do it. Hopefully with this new president, we will see some of that, but we have to push the Senate, as Senator Jackson said, the new US Senate, whether it's controlled by the Democrats, and we hope it is, they have to put money on the table for schools in every state. As Alabama, as much as Ohio and New York, we do not have enough money in our current funding system, even with additional taxes, which I support. We need the other piece, which is a federal complement to what our states and local taxpayers pay. So those are two opportunities by this moment that we ought to take advantage of, but we have our work cut out for us. This is not an easy battle ahead of us on community schools and the very successful model of community schools to make it work for every kid. It shouldn't only be where there's foresightedness enough to create a community school. I represent a lot of districts where they need them and they're not here.
Definitely. And thank you so much. I just wanted to also acknowledge, we do have staff from Assembly Member Karen McMahon's office, as Senator Hevesy also said, Assembly Member Marianne Buttonshaw, also Assemblywoman Inez Dickens, also in the Senate, Senator Prasad and Roxanne Prasad, excuse me, and Senator John Liu. Thank you so much. What we are all experiencing, in 2021, needless to say, is going to be what we make of it, right? We know we have, as Senator Shelley Mayer said, a road ahead of us that we have to continue paving and that we have to keep going along. And it's not going to be easy. From the federal level to the statewide level, and even getting our local partners involved as well with our county legislators and all the new legislators who are coming into office, and also continuing to educate those who are already in office and letting them know the diverse needs, whatever they may be, on what our communities continue to need. We also have, Senator Serino's staff is also on the call as well. Senator Sue Serino is here as well. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. If there are any questions, please feel free to add them on the side. We do have 4 more minutes left. I do want to thank our legislators for staying within the allotted time frame, and for me not having to sound a bullhorn and completely upsetting everyone. It is very, very appreciated.
Jackie, can I say something that's very important coming up? Because you talked about, and we saw when the House had a $3 billion budget and it could not get agreement with the US Senate. And it's been said over the past couple of days that President-elect Biden was a US Senator for many, many, many years. And he supposedly had a very good working relationship with McConnell. And in fact, it was said on the news that when his son died, the only US Senator to attend the funeral was McDonald, the leader. And so they have a relationship, but that's a good one. But what we don't have is, in my opinion, a Democratic majority, because without the Democratic majority in the US Senate, and that's why I said when the priorities came to Biden-Harris in the US Senate, then we're going to be whittled down by the Republicans, unfortunately, in the US Senate, and not to get what all of our communities need. And I'm not only talking about New York City, I'm talking about everywhere, in Sue Serino's district and everyone else's district, to ensure that we all provide every child in our state of New York a good education, to have internet and all of the things that we need. So it's not just the cities, it's not just the suburbs, It's all of us together. And that's what we have to come together to work for. So we need that US Senate. And just quickly, there are 2 US Senate seats. People may want to talk about it. That's in Georgia, that could give us an equal balance where if in fact there's not a majority, then the Vice President, Kamala Harris, will break a tie. That's what we're going to be focusing on January 5th, if you really need to know. And if you don't know, that's the real deal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. I also, I'm sorry, wanted to acknowledge staff members from Natalia Fernandez's office and also from Assemblywoman Latoya Joyner's office as well. So thank you so much. And Assemblywoman Peoples-Stokes's office as well. She couldn't be here with us today, and we really appreciate and value her staff being on the call. Well, I just wanted to end by saying I have just 2 more minutes, and I'll just end by saying, you know, it's no wonder when we started, you know, planning all of this, we said we have to find folks who are invested in community schools, who get it, who understand it. And the 3 of you, you know, Senator Mayer, Senator Jackson, Assemblyman Hevesy, have shown that you definitely get it. And I can tell you that we are extremely appreciative of the leadership that all of you provide, and your colleagues as well who couldn't be here to join us. Also their staff who are on this Zoom meeting as well. It is extremely, you know, gratifying, I'm sure, for our educators who are on the Zoom call, for the principals, the teachers, the community folks, our great student, Rasan, who's on the phone, who spoke so eloquently earlier. And we really are appreciative. And as Senator Mayer said, we all have work to do. And please don't be afraid to reach out to any of us on the Zoom meeting to tell us what we could do to help you help us. It is a partnership. We collaborate together. You are a part that makes the puzzle whole. And we need you as much as our community needs all of us to be working hand in hand in tandem together. We really do appreciate everything that the legislature has done and with the leadership that all of you have provided. And we thank you so, so much for taking out the time during this very, very busy time. As a matter of fact, taking the time over, you know, 2 hours to be with us today. It is extremely, you know, important to us, and we really value and respect the time that and commitment that you have given us and the support that you have shown us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jackie. And please join me in thanking Senator Mayer, Assemblymember Hevesy, and Senator Jackson again for being with us and championing the community schools strategy. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you again for being with us, and thank you to all of the other legislators and staff members that are also joining as well. I really want to thank you all for helping us close out this fantastic time together today and spending this afternoon with us talking about community schools. When we first opened, Abe told us our youth are talent abundant and opportunity scarce. Community schools are changing that, and we've really heard about that and what's going on in New York State today. And the community school strategy is a vehicle for reimagining education in New York. While we know that the pandemic has put some financial strain on the state and we have to be strategic with our current investments, the community school strategy is one to protect and grow to best and most efficiently meet the current needs for all the reasons that we've heard today. So we really want to make sure that this is something that is protected and continues to grow so that more schools like those in in Senator Mayer's district can take advantage of this strategy. I hope that we can all work together to ensure that more schools learn about this strategy as well and have the resources to implement it effectively. As we're closing for today, I want to remind you again about the resources that we shared and encourage you to sign up for our listserv to continue to get updates. We'll make sure to get that resource sheet into our chat box again. You can also find us on social media using hashtag NYS Community Schools. We have a lot of folks that have been active on today, sharing from this conversation, and we'll continue the conversation on social media. So thank you again to all of our speakers and to all of you who've been watching and participating with us today, being on. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you, everyone.